Chelsea. Great, I think we are ready to begin. So good morning everyone and welcome to this morning's session. It's great to see so many of you here this morning. I'm Kelly Henwood, Senior Consultant at TBI Communications, and I'm delighted to chair today's panel on social media in scholarly publishing. Organisations are having to constantly rethink and revise their social strategies in light of platform choices and AI through to community building and measuring impact. So today we're going to dig into some of those challenges and opportunities, and we are aiming to keep our session as practical as possible. So you can hopefully leave today with some actionable insights that you can apply straight away into your organisations. Each of the panellists will begin by sharing a short 5-minute perspective, and then we are going to explore some of the key topics that are being discussed in organisations at the moment. Along the way, we're going to attempt to run some polls, hopefully technology works for us, and invite questions to bring in your views as we go through. I will be monitoring the questions that come through on the app, and also looking to set the polls live. So if you see me picking up my phone, I assure you that is the only reason that I'm doing so. We'll then close with each speaker giving a key takeaway from the session and also an actionable insight. We'd really like to encourage you to join in today's session, so please do answer the polls, ask any questions that you may have, and share your experiences too. So before we jump straight in, I'd really like to introduce our 3 panellists. First, we have Charlie Rappel, co-founder of Kudos, a platform that helps researchers and publishers broaden the reach and impact of their work. Charlie's going to open the session by setting the scene and looking at how the social media landscape has shifted and why it's now more important than ever to align your strategy with objectives and audience insight rather than simply try and be visible everywhere. Next, we'll hear from Jitske de Vries, Head of Marketing at the Company of Biologists, a not-for-profit publisher. Jitske brings the smaller publisher perspective to the discussion, sharing the realities of managing multiple accounts with limited resources and experimenting with platforms such as Mastodon and Blue Sky and building engaged niche communities. And finally, we have Tina Hussein, Director of Social Media at Springer Nature. And Tina's going to bring to the table the larger publisher view, from empowering staff through ambassador programs to experimenting with AI in content creation and measuring the kinds of impact that really matter. And this will help us explore how organisations of all sizes can navigate today's fragmented and fast-changing social media landscape. Before we get into the panellists' perspectives, we'd like to start by hearing from you all. It's very rare that you get asked to do this, but please do pick up your phones. And hopefully, you will see at the bottom of today's session the first of the polls, which is to understand what your organisation's biggest challenge with social media is right now. So please do take a moment to vote, and we'll come back to the results later in the session. So with that, let's begin. Charlie, over to you to set the scene.
Thank you, Kelly. Hello, everybody. Lovely to be here. So when Kelly said, would I participate in this panel on social media, I was a bit like, really? A panel on social media at ALPS 2025? And part of me was thinking, like, God, haven't we done this to death many years ago, and what is there to say now? And then actually I thought about it for about 3 minutes. I thought, actually, yeah, there's quite a lot to say because, yes, it's something that as a sector we have been engaged with for a long time. In reality, so much has changed, even just in the past few weeks, in the past few months. It is a rapidly moving space, and it kind of wasn't for a time. For a time, it was pretty straightforward. We had our big 3, and we had our accounts on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and we knew what we were doing with them. And suddenly, there's a big 7 or a big 12, depending on how you look at it, and it's gone from sort of basically those 3 platforms to kind of being 40 odd that you feel like you ought to be kind of knowing about, probably hundreds if you really were to count all of the things that might or might not be considered social. So it's an expanding space, and it's also a really fragmenting space in that increasingly, right, we're seeing our audiences kind of silo themselves, and it's a bit like, you know, welcome to social media. Turn left for Blue Sky and Mastodon, and turn right for Telegram and Discord. And that is increasingly making it difficult for us to figure out where we should be and what we should be doing there. And much more complex choices to be made than there were when last time I talked about social media at a conference. And one of the things that we will probably touch on today is how you decide where to put your capacity, which is probably not huge. So assuming that most of us, however big we are as an organisation, have probably got relatively limited capacity to do this, how do we do it well and where do we do it? I mean, obviously, to an extent, it's still marketing 101, and I'm going to hope that there are some other marketers. In fact, let's see, how many marketers are in the room if your role is marketing? Hello, fellow marketers. Not that many, actually, so thanks to everybody else for coming along too. But that shows that obviously social media isn't just a marketing issue, it is a company issue, it's a brand issue, it's something that every part of the organisation has to engage with. But as marketers, we're used to kind of making decisions between different channels that we need to use, and we just apply the same logic to the platforms. So whereas you might once have been like, you know, am I going to use advertising or an event or direct mail to achieve this particular goal? Now we're thinking about, well, is that goal best going to be achieved through engagement on YouTube or discussion on LinkedIn or something like that? So there are still kind of core things that drive the decision making. I mean, basically you have to consider, you know, what is my objective? What am I trying to achieve? Where are the audience that I'm trying to reach? Where do they engage? I think for a lot of us in the room, it's probably going to be the same platforms that are relevant to us, because most of us are kind of working with similar-ish audiences. So, you know, we're going to want to be engaged with communities on LinkedIn, and probably increasingly on Blue Sky as well. I think there is nonetheless quite a lot of variation in how each of us will be using those platforms. So the types of content that we'll be creating, that's really fragmenting too, right? So there was a time when we would just sort of put up a series of sequential isolated posts just announcing things or promoting things. Now the whole usage of social media needs to be much more integrated and strategic. I talk a lot about kind of creating pillar content, anchor content, so that might be a white paper or a long form video, and then creating a lot of sort of more fragmented, snippety content around that, shorts and images and infographics and talking heads and just simple posts and so on, but tying it all together and making sure that it's all supporting a core message or a core goal or a common call to action. So I think we've got a more fragmented choice of platforms, but actually probably when it boils down to it, still a fairly clear way forward in choosing which ones to engage with. Our challenge that we'll come on to is what we do with having had a legacy of lots of different channels and lots of different accounts in those channels, and how we streamline that. It's a different approach to content now. It's much more strategic, it's much more goal-oriented, and we need to be more purposeful and thoughtful in how we join together different pieces of information, and kind of repurposing content as well. So if you're going to put effort into creating longer form content, which is sort of counterintuitive to what some of us think of when we think of social media as a short attention span place, actually there is a real appetite for longer form content if you get it into the right workflows and the right channels at the right time. So you do want to be creating some of those longer form types of content like white papers and videos and things, but you do need to then really get the bang for buck out of those and make sure that you're frequently using those and joining them up with lots of other smaller pieces of content. I think the last thing, have I got another minute?
A quick minute.
Okay. Just the last thing is that we can embrace AI in how we do this. I think there is a role for AI in helping us plan and helping us generate some content, lots of caveats around that, be very careful and be very good at your prompting. What I find AI is really good at is for saying, right, here is my white paper. Can you spit out some draft video scripts, video shorts that I'm going to quickly knock together to promote those? Or can you spit out a blog post that's based on that, or the skeleton of one? So it can help just get you from kind of 0 to 1, but you are going to want that manual input from 1 to 2. And the last thing in that context is that as well as helping us plan and create content, we also have to think much more about the role of AI in discovering that content and what kind of content does AI like to eat and cite, basically. So thinking about our structure, clear headings, answer-driven content. You know, at Kudos, we've always focused on what is it about and why is it important. And right from day one, that's been a mantra for us. And that's taken us a long way, actually, with AI search, because that is the kind of content that AI and traditional search such as Google is really looking for. So do leverage AI, do it carefully, do it thoughtfully, and think about it from both ends of your social spectrum.
Thank you, Charlie. That sets the scene perfectly. Now let's hear from Jitske, who will bring the smaller publisher perspective to the discussion.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you very much for inviting me, because I really enjoy kind of sharing thoughts with you. But like you say, there are a lot of us that don't have a lot of resources but are still faced with the same challenges. So we publish 5 journals, we host 3 community sites, and social media is spread out over the organization. Marketing mainly looks after company-wide account, company messaging, cross-title messaging, but the journal accounts, the journal teams, the community managers, they really handle the day-to-day, their own social media accounts, and they can really focus on the science. We don't have a social media team or even a social media manager, so there's not one person who's like a true expert. So you're all sharing knowledge, sharing content, and trying to find what's the best way to go about this. Spread out over the different departments, we have a social media presence on 8 different platforms at the moment. At some point, you know, feeling a tad overwhelmed with all the changes and the options, we teamed up with Kelly and her team at TBI Communications, who did a social media audit for us, and that really helped kind of ground some of that information. So where are we at the moment? What's the engagement like on the different platforms? What are other players in the field doing that we might not be doing, or that we could learn from, or that are actually pretty similar? So for the sake of time, I'm just going to touch on what we've recently done on Mastodon on Blue Sky, but perhaps some of the other platforms might come up in discussions later. So when people started to move away from X, Mastodon was one of the platforms that came up as a possible new one, possible replacement even at some point it was called. We had quite a few stakeholders who were very enthusiastic about Mastodon, practicing scientists themselves who had moved and who said, look, the tone of voice is respectful, there are good conversations taking place. You know, we want, this aligns with our values as a company as well, so we want to establish a presence. And the way we went about that is we thought, let's replicate what we do on X. Let's have one company account and then one account for each of the journals and each of the community sites, so all the teams can really focus on their specific content. Now, Mastodon didn't grow as quickly as some would have hoped or expected. It's a very different platform as some of the other ones in that it's not run by one organization, it's not just one platform or even run by one multi-billionaire. There are lots of different servers. They're often linked to topics of interest, so people can join a server on the basis of their personal or professional interest. And what we were seeing is that, yes, quite a few people were moving to Mastodon and really trying to find their way. So not only did we establish accounts on Mastodon, but we also saw an opportunity to host our own server. Now that means that we kind of can police, if that's the right word. We set the rules, the terms of engagement, and we're owning that space and saying, you know, if you want to be part of our server, then you have to be respectful to your peers. You know, these are the rules of this specific space. But once you're on a server, you can also share content and link with people on other servers easily. So we did some more research into that. We found a reliable hosting partner, and we set up biologist.social. Then more and more people started to move to Blue Sky. Not necessarily from Mastodon to Blue Sky, but there might have been people who were still on X or who were still kind of looking for what's the best one for me. And again, we got feedback from the community, from stakeholders internally and externally who said, oh, but so-and-so and so-and-so are also on there. There's some really good conversations going on. You know, at some point we should be there as well. So we had a look, and yes, there were a lot of people on there already that we recognized that were core, you know, people in our community, but we said, okay, we've seen what happened on Mastodon, we've put quite a lot of resources into that. Let's take a different approach. Let's just set up one account, a company account. All the teams can feed into what we're doing, but let's do that, let's review for a while. And the experience was so different from that. We were on there for one day, and people started saying, where are the journals? How can I communicate with the different community sites? Lots of people saying, you know, you should put more content on here. And the engagement was such in a matter of days that we actually decided to change direction, and we did set up all of those different accounts. And Blue Sky's proven to be good for us in terms of engagement. Like I say, the conversations are meaningful. They are with people that we know are part of our actual audience. The follower numbers have risen quite quickly, such that for one of our journals now, we have a bigger audience on Blue Sky than we have built up over years on X. Now, follower numbers don't say, you know, too much. I realize that because a lot of people still have an account on X but no longer use it. But I think it just shows that, you know, sometimes you start something with an expectation, and it's not until you try it that you're finding what's working for you. Having that bigger presence on Blue Sky now obviously also means that, you know, we have even more accounts to spread our time over. So if we're doing that, what are we not doing? So we're looking at several of the other platforms that we've been running for years, when we might make changes to those. But we've also had another good look at Mastodon and said, okay, with the number of, like the level of engagement that we're seeing on Mastodon, we're going to amalgamate all of those accounts. Now, Mastodon is quite good in that it lets you redirect accounts. So instead of 9 accounts, we now have the 1 account, but even if people are searching for older accounts, they're still being redirected to the new account. And there's up to a certain level you can transfer followers as well. We are very committed to keep running that Mastodon server. We've got some really strong accounts on there. BioArchive, for instance, are running their Mastodon accounts on our server. Like I said, there's not as much engagement, but there's a core part of the community who have embraced that platform, which is why we still want to keep our presence. So I'm hoping that's kind of given somebody food for thought, and yeah, it shows a bit of a journey.
Thanks, Jitske. Let's shift now to the larger view. Tina, how does social media play out at Springer Nature?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, so I'm trying to give my perspective and the perspective of Springer Nature. I mean, you've heard it already from Charlie and from Jitske. Social media nowadays is an ever-evolving field, and at Springer Nature we are conducting on a regular basis researcher surveys to find out how social media is being used amongst the research community. So we heard yesterday from Godwin, listening to the community is important. So what we see basically when we first conducted the researcher survey in 2014, most of the researchers said they are on social media because they want to connect with their peers. But this changed massively over the course of the last decade. So they are now on social media because they want to use social media to discover content, they share content, promote their own content, read content, find it through social media. And so we see already that the usage behavior is obviously shifting, but you also heard from Charlie that also the platform landscape is shifting, right? So we have to deal with platform diversification. We have to deal with polarization. If you think about China, for example, complete different social media landscape. So yes, the good old days of academic Twitter are definitely over, but social media is still a key channel for the academic discourse, and this is what we see every time that we conduct that survey. But social media, and especially also navigating this evolving landscape, is a very tough job nowadays. So you have to deal with, organic reach being on the decline. Paid social is becoming more and more important. And I think My biggest enemy is the ever-changing algorithm of all the various platforms. You never know what's being prioritized the next day. So yeah, let's look at Springer Nature for a second. At Springer Nature, we have more than 1,000 social media accounts across the whole company. It's massive, massive chaos, I can also tell you. And the majority of accounts, or let's say the corporate accounts, so those that are branded Springer Nature, sit within my team, so in communications. Imprint accounts sit within the marketing team, but the majority of accounts really sit within editorial. So these are, journal-specific accounts, accounts for disciplines. And the challenge that you face here is that all our editors, and this is similar to smaller publishers as well, they are doing social media on the side. But it's a tough job nowadays, and we see the landscape shifting. And if you ask all the editors at Springer Nature, do you really want and need your social media accounts? They would all say, yes, we definitely need it. If you ask me, I would say definitely no, we don't need that many accounts, because the ROI of social media is on the decline. And especially if you do social media on the side, it's becoming much, much harder nowadays. It's so hard to really set up an account, grow it, have a decent audience, but also then to keep that audience constantly engaged. It's a very tough job. And then, yes, you have to deal with the ever-changing algorithm as well. And I think, Charlie, you raised the point as well when it comes about content. So back, a couple of years ago, you had a piece of content and you just pushed it out on all the various platforms where you had a presence. This is no longer the case. So now you have to also have a diversified content strategy for social media. Let's look at LinkedIn for a second, because what we definitely see is that LinkedIn amongst the research community is definitely on the rise. So more researchers are getting active on social media, on LinkedIn. But what we also see is the algorithm on LinkedIn is a different beast. So LinkedIn really prioritizes people content over company content. And you might see this in your own feed. So you might follow a couple of companies, your own companies where you're employed, a couple of competitors. But you rarely see, when you look into your timeline, these posts from the company. What you see in your feed is that someone you're connected with liked a post from a company. So Kelly, because we're connected, would see, for example, Tina liked a post from Springer Nature. And this really shows you how LinkedIn's algorithm works. And this is something where we thought a lot about, and where we then decided to set up an ambassador program at Springer Nature. So to really put the person, put the human face basically at the center of the strategy. And yes, we still have, all the corporate channels. We still have also, the website, press releases, corporate social media profiles. But we also really invest in our people and let them tell the story, because we all know it, people trust people. The Edelman Trust Barometer says it every year. And people really also want to hear these authentic stories. So they want to get a glimpse behind the company logo. They want to hear real stories. And they're also quite tired of all the marketing messages that we all see all day long. And with the ambassador program, we also see that employee-generated content often receives double the engagement rates, double the click-through numbers and corporate accounts, despite the fact that the audience size of an individual is much, much smaller than the audience size of the company account, for example. And so what do we do with our ambassadors? So we have 80 at the moment, and we train them in a 3-month period to really become LinkedIn Pro, so to say. So we help them to develop their personal brand, to increase their influence on LinkedIn, connect with their peers, and they, on the other side, also, bring the company culture to life. They showcase what it's like to be part of Progress, part of Springer Nature. They talk about their work. All that content is not scripted, so it's authentic stuff. I'm not looking at these posts, what they do, so they are being trained on how to do it best, but we are not censoring anything. They don't go through an approval process. And for us, our own people, and leveraging the best brand ambassadors that you have in a company, your own employees, is really a key strategic pillar for us as well, and something that I really recommend everyone here as well to look into.
Thanks, Tina. Before we touch on some of the key topics that are being discussed in organisations, If you jump back onto the app, there is the second and final poll. We've obviously talked about how many platforms that there are currently available. So it would be really interesting to know which platform is currently your main focus for your organisation. And we'll look at the results of both polls very shortly. So to ensure we've got time for questions, we'll need to keep this next bit nice and succinct. Charlie, we've obviously heard already about how fragmented the landscape is. So with audiences spreading across multiple platforms, how do you decide which platform is worth investing your time in?
I think actually you touched on this really nicely. It's good that people might be on the platform, but they might not be doing anything on the platform. So you do have to just look not only at where your audience is, but where they're engaged. It's good to look at what competitors or others in the field are doing and see where they have amassed a following. There are tools that will do that for you. I want to say Social Blade, I think it's called Social Blade, one of the ones you can use, which will you can plug in, this is who I am, these are who some of my competitors are, and it will tell you where your community is active. But also, obviously, you've got to look at your capacity and what skills you have in-house and what kind of level of skills as well, because there's no point going all out for YouTube and then going, oh, we don't have anybody in-house who can make videos, right? So make sure that you are aligning where you want to be with what you can do. That obviously shifts a lot, like not only are your staff your best ambassadors, but they're also going to be, the ebb and flow of your social engagement is going to depend on the capacity of people to do it in their spare time and so on. So there's a few things that need to be in the mix, but primarily, you want to focus on where is my community and what kind of content do they want.
Amazing. I don't think we can get through today's session without talking about AI a little bit more. So Tina, it would be great to hear how you're experimenting with AI at Springer and what some of the risks and benefits are that you've noticed so far.
Yeah, I mean, AI comes with tons of possibilities, but and we are also encouraging everyone in the company to experiment with it. But what is most important is to always have, we call it the human in the loop. So at the end of all the prompting and all the stuff, you need to review the outcome, because we all know AI is hallucinating. I think one quick win I think that everyone can use AI for is, when you want to make your post more accessible, to use it to generate alt text. I can definitely recommend this because it's much better than I could do it, much faster than my team can do it. And sometimes it's also integrated in some of the tools, scheduling software that you might already be using. Another thing that we're doing, because I said the same like in smaller publishing houses, the editors are doing social media on the side. So they obviously struggle with the time to post, to promote the articles that they publish. And we've teamed up internally with the content innovation team and developed a tool which is called Paper to Buzz. So this is a tool that we've trained on how to write a good social media post in an engaging way, trained on our own data, but then also keeping the human in the loop at the end as well. There's no prompting required. All the editor has to do is basically pop in the DOI of the article that they want to promote, click a button, and then it spits out a ready-to-use post that they could use, in a smaller, shorter version for X and Blue Sky, and the longer version for LinkedIn and Facebook, for example. And I think what you said earlier, Charlie, also to make use of AI to really diversify your content strategy. You might have an article and you want to create a video out of it. So we also have, especially in the press team, they are running their open access video series, and they use AI just to generate the video script. So all of these things is, AI is great for, but have the human in the loop always.
Absolutely. Community's already been a key topic that's been mentioned at the conference. So Jitske, what is working now, do you think, when it comes to building those real communities, whether that be with specifically academic audiences or the wider public?
Well, I think it's important when you're trying to build or grow a community that you don't try to be overly promotional. Sometimes, we're thinking about what are our goals, or what do we want to reach, achieve, but what does the audience want? Why would they want to be in the community that you are trying to grow? And yesterday's sessions about community was quite clear in that as well. Do people have a voice? Are you listening to that voice? And then are you acting on the feedback that they're giving you? So, you know, we're lucky we have 3 strong community sites where people are actually sharing a lot of information and resources on the site, but social media is really helping us amplify that message and to say, look, all of these resources are here for free for everybody, spread the word, and people are taking part in that. So people are actively creating content as well. So we're not just saying, look, if this is what we're doing, but giving the community a space to share. So we keep coming back whenever we're thinking about those communities. How are you connecting people? How are you engaging with them and let them engage with you? And what can you do to support them?
Thanks. And a challenge that I think many do face in organisations is how you measure that impact and value. So Tina, what metrics matter most at Springer? And if you were to give a recommendation to smaller organisations of where to start, what would that be?
Measuring impact is always, a tricky thing because, it's really hard to determine the ROI of social media because you don't know if when an author, for example, looked at one of the posts that you made, liked the post, clicked through, if this really, for example, influenced their submission or their decision to submit to a journal of yours. So it's really, really hard to track that down. So we're trying this. So we have a bit of a workaround just to see, when people click on the website, what are they doing next? But it's tough, basically. There's also not, one size fits all. Obviously, we also track the usual suspects like, impressions, number of engagements, engagement rates. I think my top tip is always just get started. What gets measured gets done. So you need to track performance of your posts. And I think one of the simple things, but what people often forget, and even within our company, what people sometimes just not do is to add UTM tagging parameters to your links. Because if you do this, you really have a chance to measure the impact. So you could see, okay, where does the traffic, for example, come from? Is it coming from organic social? Is it coming from a paid campaign that I'm doing? Is there a difference in the respective platforms, for example? So this really helps you also to optimize your social media strategy, your content strategy. In my team, for example, on a bi-yearly basis, is it bi-yearly or every 6 months, we're conducting a content performance review. So we're looking at the content that we posted, and we're looking, do we see a difference in, what worked well on the specific platforms? Did the algorithm change? Do we see a difference in performance in terms of the content formats that we use? Is there, for example, some from the data that we get, for example, looking at the data, but then also seeing if we're having a downward trend sometimes, that where we can put measures in place to reverse the downward trend. Yes, there is definitely a downward trend when it comes to X as a platform, but measuring traffic to your platforms is harder and harder nowadays because all the social media platforms are really optimized to keep you in their little ecosystem. They don't want you to go out. So traffic is on the decline. But then also when it comes to metrics, it's really important to think about your objectives. So what are you actually aiming to achieve? And this can be also different by platform. So it can be that on X you're still broadcasting your content to drive traffic to your platforms, because what we shouldn't forget is that X is still a big traffic driver. Whether you like it or not, but you really should look where does your traffic come from which social media platforms. At the same time, it could also be that you're on Blue Sky to really engage with the community, because there was research out last week that obviously, yes, it's an engagement platform. You don't get impression numbers on Blue Sky, but despite this very small audience that's still on Blue Sky compared to X, for example, engagement is way higher there. But you might also be running on LinkedIn, for example, an employer brand-related campaign, and here their KPI might be, okay, you want to increase the number of applications, for example. So think about your objectives, think about the different platforms. So there's, yeah, it's not, unfortunately, there's not one size fits all, but start tracking and start putting UTM tracking in place.
Thank you. We'll open to questions in a second. Let's just quickly bring up the poll results because that may spark some questions as well. So in terms of...
Oh, you can also see it.
Yeah. Okay, just checking which one we've got up. So the biggest challenge in social media right now is resourcing. And it would be interesting to see if we had run this 5 years ago, whether that would be different. But resourcing is key challenge. I think there's a good mix across, with the exception of keeping up with algorithm trends. So I think challenges are being felt probably across the board in many of the organisations. And then if we switch to the other poll. Is that on me to switch it? Here we go. Okay, so the platform. Going to show? There we are. This is quite striking, and I do believe if we had run this 5 years ago, it would be a very different story. But we can see that the leading platform that is the majority of organisations' main focus right now is LinkedIn, with the others trailing right behind. So I think sometimes that can be reassuring for organisations to see where others are placing their focus. We'd really like to hear from you at this stage. We have microphones that are in the room, so please do raise your hand if you've got a question for the panel. Thank you. We've got one at the front here. If you could just introduce yourself with your name and organisation, that would be amazing.
Hi, I'm Lena. I'm from DOAJ, Directory of Open Access Journals. One of the challenges we face is reaching our non-English speaking audience. So we have to put in a lot of resources into translating our content. So I would just like to hear from the panel, what do they have to say on that?
Thank you. Tina, do you do anything at Springer Nature around translating content?
We do, but I think the majority of content is definitely in English. We had a couple of years ago also country-specific social media, presences, but we really reduced this. So because of the low ROI, basically, it's just too much work to keep them all flourishing, so to say. So English is the main language. What we do is sometimes we translate stuff, and then we post them as targeted posts specifically to these markets. So for example, we do this a lot on LinkedIn, when we translate stuff in French or in Spanish or in German. We also have an India presence, so a dedicated India presence for Springer Nature. But yeah, I would advise to not go too niche into the individual markets because it's a lot of work.
The other thing that I think we haven't actually touched on massively is how you leverage your author community as part of your social media engagement. And this is one area that I think authors can be massively helpful in. So we, at Kudos, we have a sort of communications management tool for authors to manage all the different ways that they communicate, including social, but also offline conferences and stuff. And recently not that recently now, but in the last couple of years, we've introduced support for WeChat and Weibo, and a lot of different platforms that authors are using outside of the kind of Western social media space. And that's really interesting to have that insight into which platforms authors are using and the posts that they are making, because they are the ones who can engage in a language that they're more comfortable with, which isn't always the language they've written the article in. And so that's one aspect, I think, of engaging with audiences in different countries, is to use your authors who speak those languages to do some of that for you. I mean, obviously, we can use AI. When you have short form content or content that you've designed for social, it works much better in translation engines and things like that. So social does open up some simpler ways of engaging with audiences, but if the root of it is the interaction and the credibility and no one in your community or staff speaks that language, then you're really limiting your engagement with that group. But if you can use a tool like Kudos to get an overarching sense of where authors are active, then you can help to maximize engagement with the brand and the organization, if not with individuals from the organization.
Yeah, thanks. Question over there.
Hi, I'm Emma from 67 Bricks. You've talked a lot about kind of dissemination and engagement with the community. I wondered if any of the panelists are also using social as a kind of social listening tool, either to figure out if there's problems, also for like trend spotting and analysis. Is that something you're already doing?
Thanks, Emma.
Yeah, I think that's where the editorial teams have a real strength, because they know, they are scientists themselves. They know a lot better how to interpret certain information. They can spot a lot better who the followers are the right people to listen to, and also jump quicker onto when a conversation goes in a certain direction. So I think the input from our editorial teams are invaluable in that respect.
Also at Spring & Nature we are doing a lot of social listening, so we have dedicated tools in place, and I'm part of the comms team, so issue management is a part of my daily job. So we are having always on searches running of specific keywords related to our brand names. So whenever something comes up, we receive an ASAP notification, and then we pass that on to the relevant team. So if someone raises a research integrity issue, for example, then we pass it on to the editorial team plus the research integrity group internally, so they take care of the stuff as well. So yeah, that's a lot. And there's also, criticism. Yeah, we briefly spoke about platform polarization. X is still the platform where most people go and start ranting. When you do social listening, not all the APIs of all the social media platforms are open. You can't do social listening on LinkedIn, for example. You have to do this manually. But Blue Sky is possible for most of the social media tools now as well, X, Facebook, but only public posts. But I think Blue Sky and X is really where you can do a proper listening nowadays.
I can see we've definitely got some questions on the app, and I'm sure there may be some more in the room. I'm conscious that we are running out of time. 45 minutes flies by. The four of us are at the conference until end of time tomorrow, so please do come and find us. I think one quick question I will just ask before we go into our final wrap-up insights. There was a question, I know Jitske and Tina, you've both mentioned about editorial teams sort of having management. There was a question around maybe unofficial channel accounts that are being set up, but using sort of journal profiles with publisher branding. Considering kind of current climate, how do you manage this?
Can I ask if the unofficial accounts, do you refer to accounts that are impersonating you, or is this?
It's like external journal editorial teams creating their own journal profiles with publisher branding.
Ah, yeah. Yeah. This is a common issue also for us at Spring & Nature. It's really hard. I tried to raise that point in the beginning when I said, if you ask all the editors, do you need the social media accounts? Everyone would say yes. We desperately need them. But it's really hard to go into the conversation with with the external editor and say, obviously, the ROI is very, very limited. It's we would propose you do it in a different way, or in the case of LinkedIn, do it with your personal profiles. So we provide, for example, our internal staff some kind of guidance on how they can best communicate with the external editors, because obviously you also don't want to ruin the relationship, because for me it's easy to say no to something, to requests that come in, but obviously the publishing editor needs to nurture the relationship with the external person. So we have some guidance in place that they can use, and sometimes yeah, sometimes they listen to us, but sometimes I also have to say they just don't listen to us, and they do their own thing. It's a high risk, especially now in today's world. We dealt a lot with accounts being hacked, racist messages being sent out. There is a huge risk associated to it. A risk about an account that gets dormant, is poorly managed, or hacked.
Okay, we are nearly out of time, so 10 seconds each. If you were to give a key takeaway or an actionable tip from today, what would it be? Charlie, coming to you first.
I'm just going to raise a completely new thing because I forgot to raise it earlier. Do give paid social some time and effort as well, because although the platforms won't tell you this, it does boost your organic engagement. So if you can just put 20 quid behind each campaign, it will help you get more out of your organic.
Fantastic. Yitzka?
I would say talk to your peers. This is a really inclusive community. A lot of people are facing the same challenges, and a lot of people are very happy to talk to you and share experiences. So this is the perfect opportunity in these days, but also link with people afterwards and just ask questions and share.
And Tina?
I would say choose your battles wisely. You don't have to be on each and every platform just for the sake of having a presence somewhere. Have a think where you want to put your resource on, and give also power to your people. So let them also talk about the good things that you're doing.
Thank you to the three of you and to you all for joining in. I do hope that there are some insights that you can take back to your organisations and hopefully continue the conversation after this session. Just a quick reminder, you now have 5 minutes to move between rooms, and the next session that is in this room will be Innovation in Small and Society Publishers. Thank you.